Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1066 for July 21st, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
I'd like to say that we started as both a producer and a blender, but we weren't allowed to show off our production skills for a while, just to we had to get there. And I think that looking back, I wouldn't change a thing.
This week I'm in Park City, Utah, where High West Distillery held its Protect the West Gala Friday night and raised $100,000 for 3 environmental charities. Brendan Coyle is the Master Distiller for High West, and he'll join me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella from Jewers here. The 2024 U.S. Open Championship may have ended, but you can still get your hands on the whiskey created to honor it. The new Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition. Trust me, a whiskey you don't want to miss. More details coming up.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. The Olympics gets underway this coming week in Paris, and Buffalo Trace will have a pop-up store in the City of Lights. The shop opened Friday in the 2nd arrondissement and will have a tasting lounge as well as a retail shop. It'll be open through the end of August. Sotheby's recent Hong Kong whiskey auction produced a whopper of a sale. A bottle of 55-year-old Yamazaki sold for more than $256,000. That's the highest price paid for a bottle of whiskey at auction this year, according to whiskey advocates Johnny McCormick. A bottle of the Macallan's The Reach 81-year-old single malt reached a high bid of $192,000 in the latest whiskey auctioneer auction. Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver appeared on WhiskyCast 2 weeks ago, and her new book, Love and Whiskey, is flying off the shelves. Turns out there are several unreleased chapters that will be available as digital downloads, and a series of whiskeys to go with them. The Lost Chapters series kicks off with a 7-year-old barrel-strength Tennessee whiskey that will be available through select retailers and reservebar.com for $139 a bottle. Only 7,000 bottles will be available, and each comes with a copy of Love and Whiskey, along with a link to download the first Lost Chapter. Download links will also be available on bottles of Uncle Nearest Single Barrel Whiskey starting later this summer. Other new releases of note this week, the Macallan is adding a new 73-year-old single malt to its red collection. There's no word on pricing, but expect it to be high. Lafroig is bringing back the highly regarded 18-year-old expression. It's been off the market for several years because of supply issues. There's no word on pricing. Altmore is launching a new travel retail collection with 12, 18, 21, and 25-year-old single malts in the cask finish collection. The 12-year-old is finished in second fill Oloroso sherry casks, the 18-year-old in second fill Madeira wine casks, the 21-year-old in second fill Calvados brandy casks, and the 25-year-old in first fill Oloroso sherry casks. That one was named Whiskey of the Year in the recent International Whiskey Competition. Pricing ranges from $58 a bottle for the 12-year-old to $500 for the 25. The Glenturret has unveiled its 2024 range of 8 single malts created by master whiskey maker Bob Delgarno. The lineup includes 7 and 10-year-old peated malts, along with expressions ranging from 12 to 30 years old, and a no-age statement triple wood expression. Prices range from £62 a bottle for the triple wood and 7-year-old peated malt whiskies to £2,100 for the 30-year-old. Knob Creek is blending its bourbon and rye whiskeys together for a new expression. Knob Creek Bourbon by Rye blends 9-year-old bourbon with 7-year-old rye. It's bottled at 56.5% ABV and will sell while supplies last for around $45 a bottle. Bullet Bourbon is out with batch number 8 of its barrel strength bourbon. It's bottled at 60.9% ABV and will carry a recommended retail price of $59.99 a bottle. Booker's Bourbon is out with this year's second batch. It's nicknamed the Beam House after the house on Bardstown's Whiskey Row, where Booker Noe lived and where Fred Noe lives today. It's 7 years, 2 months, and 22 days old, and bottled at 62.3% ABV. It carries a recommended retail price of $99.99 a bottle. Heaven Hill has introduced a new Elijah Craig toasted rye. It takes the standard Elijah Craig rye and finishes it in custom-made new toasted oak casks. It'll be available in limited quantities for around $54.99 a bottle. Jack Daniel's has released its latest Distillery Series selection. Number 13 in the series is a twice-barreled Tennessee rye. After the original maturation in new charred oak, the whiskey was put into a second new charred oak barrel for 2.5 more years. It's available at the distillery's shop and select Tennessee retailers for $41.99 a bottle. The Whiskey Exchange has 2 new exclusive bottlings, a 4-year-old New Riff single-barrel rye, and the oldest Red Spot release yet, a 31-year-old Marsala single cask that's the first single cask Red Spot bottled since the revival of Red Spot several years ago. It'll sell for £945 a bottle. And finally, word not of new whiskeys, but old ones going away. Compass Box is discontinuing its venerable Spice Tree, along with the story of the Spaniard. Spice Tree dates back to 2006, when its use of French oak staves in the secondary maturation caused a controversy with the Scotch Whisky Association that caused it to be pulled off the market a year later. It was reintroduced a couple of years later after Compass Box came up with a new way to get the same result. The story of the Spaniard was Compass Box's first attempt to create a sherried whiskey and combined sherry season casks with wine casks in the maturation. Both will still be on store shelves while supplies last, and they're being replaced with 2 new whiskeys in the Compass Box lineup. Nectarosity is an American oak-dominated blend, while Crimson Casks is similar to Spice Tree and the story of the Spaniard. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Belfast Whiskey Week events continue all week long around Belfast, Northern Ireland, along with Tales of the Cocktail in New Orleans, Louisiana. The Kensington Wine Market in Calgary, Alberta has a Fettercairn virtual tasting Tuesday night and a Torveg virtual tasting on July 30th. The Whiskey Exchange hosts the Whiskey Sponge Angus MacRailed for a tasting at its Great Portland Street shop in London on August 1st. And Whiskey Fringe gets underway August 9th and runs through the 11th in Edinburgh, Scotland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin and the Classic Malts lineup. Once again, I'm in Park City, Utah this week visiting the folks at High West Distillery. They held their annual Protect the West Gala Friday night and raised $100,000 for the American Prairie Reserve, the Wildland Firefighters Foundation, and Protect Our Winters. Before the event, I had a chance to sit down with Master Distiller Brendan Coyle. Here's our conversation. So it's been almost 10 years since you moved up here to Wanship, to the big distillery.
Yeah, pretty much spot on almost, yeah. 2013 was kind of the late 2013 was a soft opening, I'd say, of that production facility, yeah.
What has it meant to you to have a big distillery as opposed to the little one down in downtown Park City?
Well, I mean, it kind of speaks to the nature of our company, like the experimentation behind it, behind having a little system, you know, having a small, nimble small batch size system speaks to kind of the R&D and the fun things we get to do. We love to experiment. We love to innovate. But to have a big system like this, you get to focus on other things that are also fun, like consistency and things of that nature, to say, well, when we have, 80% of it figured out, and when I say figured out, I mean like for a recipe or for a process or something like that. When we have about 80% of it figured out, to really fine tune it and tweak it on a big system to see how perfect you can get it, it's about perfection, right? It's about repeatability and perfection, because that's the most efficient way that a distillery operates, is 24/7. You kind of keep doing the same thing over and over again for a while, 2-3 months, whatever, and then you switch to a different recipe or a different process, and you do that 24/7 as long as you can, and that's the most efficient way to run a distillery. And so to tweak that last 20, that last 10% on the big system, and try to get it as perfect as possible and repeatable as possible and efficient as possible, there's some pride in that, I'd say. There's a lot of fun in that too.
High West started out as a blending house when David and Jane Perkins founded the place, and you were blending other people's whiskeys. You're still doing that, but you're putting more of your own stuff into bottles now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would I would take the opportunity to remind everyone that we started out as a blending house, and we were producing at the same time. We produced from day one, but of course you didn't see those components, those batches make it into any of our blends for a while, because it takes time, obviously, to get it there in the maturation warehouse. But I'd like to say that we started as both a producer and a blender, but we weren't allowed to show off our production skills for a while, we had to get there. And I think that looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, because, to make every style of whiskey out there in the world and make it well, you'd need multiple different systems, it would be a kind of an insane project. So to be able to focus on 2 or 3 styles, 2 or 3 directions, 2 or 3, mash bills to scale up in a big way, and then to be able to play with on the blending table all these other flavor profiles, processes, mash bills across not just the country, but the world, and work it into your process, work it into your company. It's kind of like the ultimate dream, right? You get to have fun producing, you get to have fun blending, you get to have fun creating, and you get to play in a lot of different worlds, at the same time.
What's been the most rewarding part of all this?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to or look at any interviews with me back in time, I'm kind of a science geek. I like the process. I love using multiple different disciplines, putting it all together to build, to design, to run a great process and create an incredible product. Yeah, that brings people together and makes them happy. It's fun for me because you get to use a lot of different disciplines, from the mathematics to the chem-eng, to the microbiome. You get to play in a lot of different disciplines and have fun doing it. And at the end of the day, you're making this product that brings everyone together for a great time. So it's kind of a dream gig,
What does it mean to you when people line up a mile from the distillery for a midwinter night's dram in October each year?
I think those guys are crazy. I think those guys are crazy. I love it. I love the passion. I love to see it. But yeah, I think it's fun. It's you can kind of equate it to other things too. It's like, if you're really, really into spirits, if you're really into whiskey, you'll do things like that. Absolutely. If you're really into music, if you're really into like live music, you'll do things. Oops, let me turn that off. Then you'll line up around the block to see a crazy concert with your favorite band. I love seeing the passion come out of people, and that's first and foremost. That if you're that passionate enough about something to spend the night, sleep on the sidewalk, and be the first in line, then yeah, go for it. Absolutely, I love seeing it. It's the passion. It's why we do what we do in the distillery. We kind of dedicate our lives to spirits and the process and putting it all together because we just love to do it. There's a lot easier ways to make a buck, I'd say. But this is just really fun. So to see the passion kind of overflow into other people too, that get to taste it, try it, and see the glimpse as well, that's fun for us.
You're about to release at some point here in the next year or so your first home distilled bourbon. What does that mean?
Oh, that's a milestone. when we first started the company, we were known as this rye distiller, for a long time. And that was great. We made our name in rye first, obviously. And that was really cool. We always kind of had it in the back of our head. It's like, well, we're a whiskey distillery, not just a rye whiskey distillery. And so we're excited to jump further out of bounds from the rye category there. It started with some different like wheat whiskeys and oat whiskeys and rye whiskeys. And then of course we got into single malt, so we've done several iterations of our high country single malt that we're pretty proud of. And, bourbon's that next massive step. We're getting into it a little later than I thought we would because we were kind of running to catch up on our rye program because it was pretty popular. But we're excited to get into it. I mean, it's kind of like that. It's really the most famous American spirit of all time. Not the first, but the most famous. And so it's really exciting to jump into it, head first.
When might we see that first bourbon hit the market?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the first rendition, you're going to see it like come into a blend, not on its own, I would imagine. But I think you'll no doubt see it on its own, like we just did the Bottled and Bond rye release that we're pretty excited about. I have to assume that we're going to do a Bottled and Bond bourbon in the future. No date set yet, but I think you'll see it worked into a blend first. And that's what we're going to kind of focus on to begin with. But we're looking at probably, we're playing with it, that's for sure. It's on the blending table, and we're playing with it. And I got to think that next year you'll probably see it.
You started out with David and Jane Perkins and transitioned over to Constellation's ownership. How is it working under Constellation when you've got the resources now to really do what you want?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like, and I tell everybody, I'm totally open and honest about it. It's give take, right? You have more corporate processes to go through. You have more levels, of that, quote unquote bureaucracy. But that's important to a certain degree too. The great side about it is that, like you said, the resources. You have a lot more resources. You have a lot more friends in the industry. So I'll give you an example. We love to play with barrel finishing, wine barrels, all things like that. Well, jumping into the Constellation family, all of a sudden we have all this access to wonderful wine barrels, right, to do finishing in, which we didn't have before, We had access to different barrel brokers and such, but when you're in the family, you kind of get first pick in a lot of regards. So there's a lot of great things about it, and the resources and the access and the friends in the family, in the Constellation family, has been fantastic. So it's been great.
You also have tie-ins with Nelson's Greenbrier in Tennessee as a part of the Constellation family. Any thought of doing a mashup between you guys and Nelson's?
Yeah, definitely we talk about it. We've done some kind of we've done a lot of collaboration and information sharing behind the scenes that the consumer might not see because it's not a co-labeled product or something like that. But there has been a lot of work together. There has been a lot of collaboration, a lot of idea sharing, and a lot of work behind the scenes. It would be great to have that, come onto a label, come onto a product in the future. Again, I gotta imagine it's not if, it's kind of when. Nothing lined up on the books this moment, but I think what you've seen before is doing some other stuff like with the Prisoner Share. We kind of been playing on the wine side a little bit, and I think you'll see some work with tequila in the future as well. But I'm sure that NGB is on the list for coming up.
Let's talk about that Prisoner's Share collaboration with the Prisoner Wine Company.
Yeah, that was a big one. That made some waves. We got a lot of great feedback on that, and there's talk about some passionate people as well. We're passionate in our spirit side. Prisoner Wine is very passionate on the wine side, and so getting with Chrissy and doing those types of collabs, and again working behind the scenes to build something that is kind of assertive, in your face, a really big, punch above its weight kind of a collaboration, but also have it appealing to a lot of people. That was fun. That was super fun because, obviously I don't know nearly as much about wines as Chrissy does, and vice versa for her on the spirit side. And so that was pretty cool, getting together when we put pen to paper and started getting in the lab and tasting things, doing quick renditions. What came out of that was a blast, for sure. It's cross-pollination. I talk about it all the time. The cross-pollination across the industry is so much fun, whether it's different yeast strains, barrels, production methods. You can learn a lot about new product development and have great ideas and great innovations if you consider other categories in alc bev. Think about beer, think about wine, think about other things that's related to your industry but not directly in it. You can make some really interesting stuff when you cross-pollinate.
Full disclosure, I was High West's guest this week, but as always, full editorial control over the content of this podcast remains with WhiskyCast. Thanks to High West Master Distiller Brendan Coyle for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Lagavulin, an award-winning single malt scotch from Islay, world-renowned for its balanced, smoky, peaty taste. Discover Lagavulin's full lineup at malts.com. Let's open up the What I'm Tasting This Week department with High West's new Bottled in Bond Rye. It's 100% High West distillate from the spring of 2018, made with 80% raw rye and 20% malted rye, and of course it's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has baking spices, citrus fruits, honey, vanilla, and a touch of chocolate. The taste is spicy and thick with cloves, cinnamon, and cardamom spices, balanced by citrusy tartness and chocolate notes. The finish is long with a touch of lime zest and lingering spices. I'm scoring the High West Bottled in Bond Rye a 93. High West's Prisoner's Share whiskey is a collaboration with the Prisoner Wine Company and takes High West's whiskey and finishes it in Prisoner's red wine barrels. It's bottled at 50.8% ABV. The nose has touches of red grapes, fresh berries, and cherries. The taste has a nice balance of fresh berries, red grapes, chili powder, and dark chocolate, while the finish is long and fruity. It's an excellent whiskey, and I'm scoring High West's The Prisoner's Share a 95. Finally, High West has been producing American single malt whiskey for several years, but its High Country single malt is a distillery-exclusive bottling. It's bottled at 46% ABV, and the nose is malty with touches of lemon zest, dried fruits, and honey. The taste has barley sugar sweetness complemented by lemon zest, grapefruit, and cooked bananas. The finish is long and malty, and I'm scoring High West's High Country single malt a 92. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,700 whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
Every year, Dewar's, the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open Championship, rolls out a special limited edition whiskey to celebrate that year's tournament. The 2024 championship wrapped up in June, but the 2024 Dewar's 19-year Pinehurst edition is available now, and you don't want to miss it. This year's 19-year whiskey is double-aged, then extra-matured in rye casks, offering a rich profile with notes of pear and heather honey. There's a hint of spice in there, too, along with a dusting of cinnamon and cocoa powder. It's a sensory delight for any true whiskey or golf fan. So trust me, my fellow aficionados, grab a bottle and enjoy a whiskey crafted with the same skill and precision that makes the U.S. Open legendary. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume. Imported by John Dewar & Sons, Coral Gables, Florida.
Let's open up the inbox and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. Still getting comments on our interview 2 weeks ago with Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver. Rafa Nava posted this in the WhiskyCast community app. Great interview as always. Loved her attitude and focus. Also interesting and solid reasons behind their cognac. The Whiskey Fairy dropped off a bottle of the new Glenrothes 18-year-old earlier this week. I posted a photo on social media and got plenty of comments. Ashley Monroe posted on Facebook, "Seriously, what do you put under your pillow to entice this fairy? I've tried coin, chocolates." Well, Ashley, the answer is simple. You've got to sleep with an empty bottle of whiskey under your pillow. And Norbert Tibarts has a simple request. Tell that fairy to come to the Netherlands. Message delivered, Norbert. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. You'll find it in your app store. You can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
100 individual farms of Irish barley, Separately harvested, malted, fermented, distilled and matured. Is that too much effort? Perhaps. Unless you're interested in flavour above all else. Waterford whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. Utah's liquor laws have loosened up in recent years, but there's still one mainstay that affects cocktail lovers. Bartenders can't pour a double shot of anything, and when making a cocktail, they can only pour 1.5 ounces of the base spirit, say a bourbon in an old-fashioned. They're allowed to pour a 2nd ounce of a so-called flavoring spirit, but that's it. Everything else in the cocktail has to be non-alcoholic. That forces bartenders to be creative. For instance, the state considers bourbon and rye to be different spirits, so bartenders can mix and match bourbons and ryes in a cocktail. Gone, though, are the days when bars had to operate as members-only clubs and you had to buy a $5 membership before you could order a drink. And the so-called Zion Curtain that forced bartenders to mix drinks out of sight of their patrons is also a distant memory. Some credit the 2002 Winter Olympics with forcing Utah to modernize its liquor laws, and with Salt Lake City poised to get the 2034 Winter Games this week, one wonders whether more modernization is coming in the near future. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey at the forefront of the American single malt movement, exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys, ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blue straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled and bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
The 2024 release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is out now. Available at Dewars.com. Get it while you can and appreciate every double-aged rye cask finished dram. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and normally comes to you from the charming yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. But this week I'm on the road in Park City, Utah. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.